Hey world, Zach here, doing video 2 of my video series about the 8 spheres of wellness. For those of you that don't know, I'm doing a video series explaining what the 8 spheres are, what falls into each sphere, and some tips and tricks for bringing up your wellness in each one of those dimensions or spheres. So I know in my last video I mentioned I was going to do physical fitness next. I've changed my mind. I'm doing spiritual health this time, mostly because without a strong foundation in this sphere of wellness, it's really hard to succeed in the other 7. This is the place that I always start with students and making sure that they have those basics down before we start working on more complex things. So we're starting here. So I am going to acknowledge right off the bat that I understand that the term spiritual wellness or spiritual health can be off-putting to some people, and I completely get it. And I always preface this lesson by saying that when it comes to religion, religion is something that can be part of spiritual health, but it's not all the spiritual health. And depending on the individual, religion might not even exist within your spiritual health wellness anyway. So it can be a part of it, but it is not necessary. So, so now let's get going. So, spiritual health and spiritual wellness, it can be kind of explained in 2 kind of concepts. A more abstract concept, which we're going to touch a little bit about, but then more practical skills, that's just going to be a bulk of this video. So, to get the abstract stuff out of the way, what I explain to students is spiritual health is acknowledging and accepting some truths about reality. And these truths are that you are one person on a planet of 7 billion. And the idea of billion, the number is so big that many of us can't even properly fathom it. Whatever your idea of a billion is, it's probably much smaller than the actual number, billion. Do a whole lesson on figuring out how big those numbers actually are. So you're one person on a planet of 7 billion, and each of those 7 billion people have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own lives, their own experiences. And we're all on this one planet. And the planet's so massive that a bulk of us will only see a fraction of it in our lifetimes. But in reality, our planet is an insignificant blip on the scale of the universe. And the scale of the universe is, again, astronomically big. And it's so old, it's 13.5 billion years old. And our lifespan, again, is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that time. And so it's acknowledging all those facts about our place in the universe and the scale of the universe, and not having an existential crisis every time you think about it. And this is where religion falls into spiritual health. Religion might be the pathway for accepting these facts. And there is no right or wrong way of acknowledging and accepting these facts as long as they're not detrimental to your other spheres of wellness. So think about substance abuse is not a healthy way to deal with these realities. And that your manner of practicing acceptance isn't negatively impacting other individuals. So that's the abstract side. Now we're going to talk about the more practical stuff. And before I get into it, I do want to preference that in this series of videos, I'm going to be talking lots of activities, lots of things that you can do to kind of bring up your level of wellness. And I'd really suggest if you're going to do any of them, make something what I call a life portfolio. It's basically a binder where you can put all these things in. It's divided up by each sphere, so it's a great kind of foundation piece for your self-growth and your self-reflections and all that fun stuff. So the practical sense of spiritual health is all about understanding who you are and your direction, where you're going. Now, the very first thing that I get any student to do when they're working with me is understand their core values, who they are as an individual. These are basically descriptors of the kind of person that you are. And it's not physical senses. I have a beard and dark hair that's slowly disappearing, but my essence, who I am deep down, what it is that makes me me, my soul, if you would. That's what values are, and everyone's values are different. They're based on our education and our experiences and the people that we surround ourselves with, but figuring them out is a key piece to finding success in life. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. Again, this would be the very first thing to go on your life portfolio, is a list of your values, and you can have as many or as few as you think fit for you. there's many different ways to come up with them, and it's hard to do. They're going to change throughout your life, and I would suggest once you have them written down, read them every once in a while, edit them, change them, take away the ones that you don't think fit you anymore, and add new ones that based on your new experiences. The very first thing I tell students to do, because just writing down your core values can be a difficult thing if you haven't done a lot of self-reflection, is to make a list of everything that you enjoy, everything that you like doing, your hobbies, your interests. If you had to read 100 books on one topic, what would that topic be? What do you find yourself gravitating towards in self-isolation? Is it outside? Is it books? Those are things that those interests come from your core values. And once you kind of list everything out, you can start looking at the similarities. For me, education, learning is a huge core value for me. And once I put out all my hobbies, I could see that education, self-growth, that is a core value for myself. So you can ask yourself those questions. Another really good self-reflection technique is known as the perfect day activity, or the ideal day activity. So this is basically you writing out from start to finish your perfect day. Now this isn't you won the lottery, or if you had a million wishes, what would it be? This is your ideal day, like your average day. So nothing, not special, just your average day being the exact way that you want it. So if you were to wake up, where would you be? What would your room look like? What would you be waking up? Who would you be waking up beside? What would you have for breakfast? What would you do for your job? How would you spend your free time? Where do you live? Answer all these questions being as specific as possible, and that gives you some really good insight as to kind of what it is that you want in life and where you want to go in life. I also have some really good activities on figuring out your core values, that they're just activities about doing that. So if anyone's interested in that, please let me know. Bucket list is another really good thing that you can do when it comes to figuring out your core values as well. And something else that goes really well once you've got that self-reflection piece done, or starting to write down your core values, is do a personality test. I find 16 personalities is the best one that I've found online. They do a really good job of explaining everything and offering good information and good tips. Now, when it comes to personality testing, I do like to warn students that once you get the results, don't build yourself into that box. Don't think that this is the end-all, be-all of who you are. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule, and in reality, there's probably more personality types than there are people on the planet. But what personality tests do really, really well is they help validate some traits. So there's always things about ourselves that we want to change or want to improve and grow, and that's fine. But sometimes we want to change things that aren't necessarily bad, but we think they're bad. And I find personality tests are really good ways to validate those traits about yourself that you think you need to change, but they're really just fundamentally who you are. And it's a great activity in accepting yourself. Learning styles, figuring out your learning styles. Are you tactile, kinesthetic, visual? That can also be really beneficial in figuring out who you are as an individual. So all that self-reflection stuff, figuring out who you are, is the very first thing that you want to do when it comes to self-growth and spiritual health as one. So as I said, spiritual health is about knowing who you are and the direction that you're going. So everything I just said was about knowing who you are. The direction you're going is when we get to goals and goal setting. So goal setting is something I'm going to bring up many times throughout this series. So I'm not going to dive deep in it today. What I will say is the best way to do goals is you want to have long-term, medium-term, and short-term goals. I'd highly recommend not setting too many at first. Start small and grow from there. But the best way to do goals is to have your end goal. So your end goal is going to be, I'm going to paint my living room. Well, break that goal down to objectives. So I'm going to go and look at different colors of paint. I'm going to go and get all the supplies I need. I'm going to take one day and take everything out of the room. I'm going to take a second day and tape it off. Make it into objectives and make those kind of more manageable chunks so you don't get overwhelmed. The other thing I'll say about goals is that goals should be dictated by your values. Your core values should make it very clear what your goals are. And I bring this up because many of us in life, will set goals and act in a way that's against our values. I always bring up to my students about being a teenager. We all gave into peer pressure. We all did something or said something that we didn't believe in, but we wanted that person to like us, or we wanted somebody to think that we were cool. And we did those things and we acted outside of our core values. And when you do those things, you don't feel good. You don't feel good about who you are. So when you're doing these activities, when you're doing things that you find, when you're self-reflecting, be as honest as possible to yourself and do them for you. Don't do them for your significant other. Don't do them for your family or your friend. Do it for what you believe in, what you think is the best direction for your core values. So that's the kind of tip that I want to give. I'm going to end this video by stating that there's one more really good questionnaire to do. It's called the Proust questionnaire, Proust questionnaire. That's a very old test, but it'll ask you some questions about yourself that you've never thought about in your life. And if you think really honestly and answer like the 30 questions that are on that test, you'll get a really good sense of who you are, and it's a really good self-reflection activity. So that's it for now. If anyone wants more information, needs more information about any activities or any specific topic I talked about today, please let me know. And yeah, I'll have the next video in a few days. Thanks, everyone.